בערוץ ביוגרפיה.
Fame. It brings wealth, privilege, and adulation.
Brittany, you're gorgeous.
Actors get very spoiled when you're on top of your game. It's a very seductive lifestyle.
Brittany, can you blow us a kiss?
For many, it's the ultimate fantasy.
Hi, guys.
She would hug them, she would know their names. She loved being a star.
You're on every kid's teeny bopper magazine in the country, and it's cameras. Corey, look here.
But with fame comes a world of temptations.
You grow up very fast. You do things you shouldn't be able to do.
He dusted out in the business. Really didn't dust out on him. He dusted out in the business.
And a world of pressure to perform.
It was the start of him getting perhaps too intense about his art.
Keith began to depend on prescription drugs to sleep and to function.
And when the spotlight fades, some will do anything to win it back.
You're used to the paparazzis being there. You get used to people wanting autographs. It's just a way of life.
Hollywood is fantasy land. You get the fame, you get the riches, you get everything you want, but it comes at a price.
Brittany, can you blow us a kiss real quick? Yeah.
The press can build you up, they can create your career and make you a huge star, but after that, they can also help your demise. And if you're not strong enough, it can be an awful way to go down.
She was amazing. She could play any role. She became the character.
Even?
She was so funny and charismatic.
You're a virgin who can't drive.
She was an actress that really delivered.
Don't make a lot of noise in the morning. I like to sleep late.
She was very open and honest, silly, and this big personality that everybody could relate to in some way.
You asking me out on a date, Jimmy Smith Jr.?
Her eyes were so big and bright. Her teeth were so white and always sparkling.
Brittany, you're gorgeous.
Yeah. Brittany Murphy might be the happiest girl I've ever met.
Brittany Murphy was born in Atlanta, Georgia on November 10th, 1977. When she was 2, her parents divorced. Brittany moved with her mother, Sharon, to Edison, New Jersey. Even as a little girl, Brittany showed an interest in performing.
Starting at age 4, Brittany went to a performing arts school and learned everything. She was a triple threat, acting, singing, dancing.
She was funny and charming and bubbly and the center of attention, which is exactly where Brittany loved to be.
She loved performing. She was just born to be huge.
By age 13, Brittany had starred in local theater productions and had even landed a handful of TV commercials. Her childhood dream was actually earning money, and the young ingenue had bigger ambitions.
She said to her mom, "I want to be a star, Mom, and we need to move to Hollywood."
After she performed in 3 commercials in a single day, it was clear that Brittany had real potential. Her mom agreed to send Brittany to Los Angeles with a chaperone to try her luck in Hollywood.
She's auditioning, and actually no one's biting.
But she was determined, and she was able to then convince her mother to move with her to Hollywood.
Brittany's career started cooking. She landed a recurring role on Drexel's Class, then she got one on Almost Home.
She's on Murphy Brown, Blossom, Party of 5.
God, you're such a lifesaver, Joel.
And then the big role comes, and she appears in Clueless.
The movie was a massive hit, but the Clueless star everyone was talking about wasn't Brittany.
Alicia Silverstone was clearly pitted as a new teen star. Brittany was, in all fairness, heavier.
It's my hips, isn't it?
The part she was playing was the frumpy sidekick, and everybody during that filming, they were all in their 20s, and she was actually 15. So in contrast, it made her look even more awkward.
By age 17, she'd made a minor splash in LA. But over the next 6 years, the majority of her roles were in mostly unsuccessful films such as The Prophecy 2 and Trixie. It wasn't until 2001 when 23-year-old Brittany took Hollywood by storm.
The lesson that she did learn from Clueless was looking at Alicia, this skinny, sexy, successful leading lady. I think a little light went off in Britney's head, almost like she figured out really fast that if she was going to be as successful as she wanted to be, her talent wasn't going to get it there alone.
And so she lost weight, she dyed her hair.
People are like, what is this? She's blonde, she was a different person.
Britney became a very hot commodity in Hollywood.
Don't Say a Word, that was her stepping up to the plate of actually having a serious career as an actress. 8 Mile was a huge success.
You live with your family?
I got out of there as quick as I could.
She had Riding in Cars with Boys. She had Little Black Book. The movies kept on getting bigger and bigger.
Britney was showing that she had range and she was capable of doing the serious films like Girl Interrupted, as well as the fluffy films like Uptown Girls.
It was like kind of like Britney mania.
It was very exciting. It was kind of, all right, it's finally coming.
Always commit to your dreams, because they do come true. We're in America, baby.
Have a nice day.
Britney had reached a new level of fame, and the tabloid press pursued the actress. But this was no ordinary relationship between a star and the paparazzi.
She would hug them, she would know their names. She loved being a star.
She was the most trusting, loving person, and I think she really tried to treat everybody equally, and that included paparazzi.
Bye, guys.
Thank you, Britney.
You have a really great night, okay?
You too.
I think she realized early on that if you treat them well, they'll treat you well.
Everyone in Hollywood seemed to treat Britney well. In 4 short years, she landed roles in 10 films. But by 2005, some worried Britney was becoming a victim of her own success.
She was a person that really enjoyed working, whether it be something huge or something smaller. I don't think it was this, I will only do these type of roles. She loved acting.
Unfortunately, once you start to do everything, then the really good offers don't come in anymore.
Actors need to be selective and be in films that are hits. Britney got into a pattern of having flop after flop after flop.
By 2006, Murphy was appearing mostly in box office misses like The Groomsman and The Dead Girl. It was during this vulnerable time that Britney reunited with an old family friend, screenwriter Simon Monjack.
They were both involved in this movie called The White Hotel. It's about an opera singer who was being treated by Dr. Sigmund Freud. And the movie was so strange, it actually never ended up being made.
There was something that just clicked and was magical with the two of them. I think he was a stable, nurturing, loving, put her on a pedestal kind of guy.
It was a whirlwind romance. In April 2007, after less than a year as a couple, Britney and Simon were married.
They just had so much fun together. They had the longest honeymoon phase.
Her career was in tatters, but Britney had found happiness with her new husband. Until the tabloids had their say. By 2007, 29-year-old Britney Murphy had gone from A-list actress to the leading lady in box office disasters. And while she found happiness with her new husband, Simon Monjack, the media seemed determined to bring their honeymoon to an end.
I think the immediate response to the two of them as a couple was based purely on physicality. Simon is heavier, he's older, and Britney, very kind of pure and sweet and bubbly. I think that the instinct was that she's somehow being used.
The press corps that had been so instrumental in making Britney a star now seemed to turn on her by attacking her new husband.
Simon was this character that everybody painted as a little bit shady.
Given the fact that Simon had an expired visa before the wedding, it's going to arouse serious suspicions that this is just to keep him in the country.
Britney stuck by her new husband, but the tabloids were relentless. They dug up warrants for his arrest on charges of fraud and credit card theft.
Nobody likes to hear negative things about somebody they love. It's awful.
I think Britney got into this spiral of despair, and I don't think she ever got out of it.
While Simon was taking a beating in the press, Britney was also suffering career disappointment.
She was supposed to reprise her role of Gloria in Happy Feet 2. That fell through. Also, her role in the Sly Stallone movie Expendables was cut out. Then King of the Hill, on which she did one of the main voices, was not renewed.
She was an actress who had slipped away a bit from the public consciousness.
But behind the scenes, Britney was working as hard as ever. While preparing to star as an opera singer and failed ballerina in the White Hotel, Britney had immersed herself in ballet. Though the film was scrapped, she continued her intensive dance training.
We'd work for 2 hours every day for 3 years. She had the most perfect body for ballet.
But her slimmed-down dancer's physique touched off new rumors.
The press started to speculate that Britney had an eating disorder.
I never knew of an eating disorder. I knew of a piglet. She loved her food.
But the media speculation grew even more vicious as the tabloids also claimed that Britney was abusing drugs.
It's total rubbish. Britney never took any drugs of any kind.
She had a personality that was so huge, and I think everybody just, looked at her and thought, if you're loud and crazy, there's got to be a reason for it. But there wasn't. It was just her.
She suddenly turned on the paparazzi. These people that had become her friends over the years, she started to see them as the enemy.
In November 2009, Britney was filming a thriller titled The Caller in Puerto Rico when she abruptly left the cast. Rumors spread that she'd been difficult to work with and that Simon had been drunk on the set.
After coming back from the set of The Caller, Britney got sick. Just a regular flu. She treated it the same way she would treat a flu.
But it quickly progressed in her system, so she was getting weaker and weaker.
She said she'd had a bad throat, and she did. She always suffered from anemia.
The rumor is she got quite sick and she didn't want to go to the doctor because she didn't want photographs out there and more rumors to circulate.
If you've been persecuted before because you look too skinny, the last thing you want to do is go out of your house not looking your best, because there is a price to pay.
I think actors and actresses today are constantly afraid of what will be reported in the latest blog or entertainment news show.
Those fears and those paranoias build up in people to the point that, as you see in this case, she decided to stay home and really take care of herself.
Britney treated her illness with various over-the-counter drugs, but on December 20th, 2009, her condition deteriorated sharply.
That morning, she woke up, she couldn't breathe. She went out and to get some air. Sharon followed her out. I'll say this because I know you can't. She said, "Mom, I'm dying, I love you."
Back inside, Britney collapsed in her bathroom. Around 8 a.m., her mother phoned 911, and Simon performed CPR for 9 minutes until paramedics arrived.
Britney, for the first time, was almost fighting for air. Her eyes were not right. They were darting off left, right, and center.
Britney was rushed to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Around 10 a.m., doctors informed Simon that they were unable to save her.
I called Simon. And I said, "Simon, it's not true. It can't be true." And he was in floods of tears, and he said, "Darling little Brit died this morning."
It was out of nowhere. It was, I think shocking to everybody.
What seemed like an ordinary case of influenza was in fact something far more serious.
Her primary cause of death was pneumonia.
The secondary cause of death was acute anemia, and then followed by multiple drug interaction. They found no indication of illicit drug use. She was taking over-the-counter cold medicine.
Britney Murphy, a performer whose career had scarcely begun, was dead at the age of 32.
She had so much to give, and she wanted to be a mom so bad, and that was her next big thing.
A lot of these issues with her could have been prevented if she were out of the house with some expert care.
But some say Britney was the victim of a much more pervasive tragedy in the celebrity world.
You want to know what broke Britney Murphy's heart? Hollywood broke Britney Murphy's heart.
I think Simon really, truly believed that. This was a girl whose career had just blossomed. She'd never had rejection until later on in life, and she'd never learned how to deal with it.
It's a very strange, dark downside of celebrity that she fell victim to.
Glimpses of her potential can be seen in more than 20 film roles. But Brittany Murphy is also remembered through the charity that was created in her name.
The Brittany Murphy Foundation. It's all about her love of children. That was her legacy.
For friends and fans, Murphy's early death is doubly tragic because it cut short a comeback many saw as inevitable.
We'd already started working to get her ready to do a screen test for Black Swan. Natalie Portman did a wonderful job, but Brittany would have been a hell of a contender.
I think she was always one film away from having a comeback, but we never saw her in that comeback film.
Actors get very spoiled when you're on top of your game, and they get used to that certain lifestyle. And then when the lifestyle's gone, it's gone. It's gone, but you still think in your head that you're that star.
You're a vampire, Michael. My own brother, a sucking vampire.
Corey Haim in the 80s ruled the world. He was a superstar.
Everybody loved him. He was fresh-faced. He was talented. He was funny. And also, he seemed authentic.
You know how wonderful you are. Yeah, but it doesn't turn you on, does it?
Corey Haim was a brilliant actor. He really was.
He radiated a kind of cockiness and a confidence, but also a kind of vulnerability. He just became a sort of heartthrob with a heart.
Mercedes. Oh, I've bumped into her a million times. She's never bumped into me once.
He's the type of guy that would give the shirt off his back. He had, like, just the biggest heart in the world.
Corey Haim was born in Toronto, Canada on December 23, 1971, to Bernie and Judy Haim.
He was a handful. He was just like always wanting attention, just like high energy.
At age 8, he got the attention he craved when he accompanied his older sister Carol, an actress, on a meeting with an agent.
Talent scout in Toronto actually just saw him. He didn't go to acting school. He didn't do any of that kind of stuff. You know, he's just very naturally talented.
Haim landed his first role at just 10 years old on a Canadian television series called The Edison Twins. And from the moment the camera started rolling, Corey was hooked.
I was born to act. I love it too much on set. It's too good of a comfortable feeling.
In 1984, Haim made his big screen debut in Firstborn.
I don't care where we go. Let's just go.
Just leave, Mom.
Yeah.
And suddenly Hollywood couldn't get enough of him.
It just snowballed, you know what I mean? It just went from Firstborn to getting his new agent in LA. And we had no time to think. You know, and this normal thing, whatever normal is, was gone.
In 1985, the Haims left Canada for Los Angeles. Within a year, critics were hailing Corey's performance in the teen comedy Lucas.
Hear me good, you pissant.
Don't you call me that. Don't you call me a pissant, you dumb jock.
Lucas, how big was that? That was huge.
Corey Haim was not only talented, he was beloved. Everybody in the business wanted to work with Corey Haim.
But the role that would transform his career came in 1986 when he was offered a part in Joel Schumacher's vampire film The Lost Boys, co-starring fellow teen actor Corey Feldman.
They're awesome monster bashers. The meanest, the baddest.
Released on July 31st, 1987, Lost Boys grossed over $32 million. The duo went on to star in a slew of buddy films and became two of the highest-paid teen stars of the decade.
The press called it Corey Mania, and it was a huge phenomenon.
As big as you could get, I guess. I mean, you know, when you're on every kid's teeny bopper magazine in the country and it's cameras. Corey, look here, Corey. I mean, it's the insanity of the media.
I mean, it was absolutely crazy. It was great. It was fantastic. It's just, it's a lot to bite off and chew all at the same time.
Hollywood is fantasy land. You get the fame, you get the riches, you get everything you want, but it comes at a price.
He came into fame at a very young age and at a very large scale. Temptation was there. He never really had a childhood.
Instead, Corey got a Hollywood childhood.
drugs, booze. I mean, I got my Lost Boys tattoo. I was 15 and a half. You grow up very fast. You do things you shouldn't be able to do.
Getting in with the wrong crowd. It's a very seductive lifestyle. I mean, I've seen it. It's very evil.
But many say Haim wasn't taking drugs just for fun. Since his earliest days in Hollywood, he'd been harboring a terrible secret.
Corey Haim had been sexually abused when he was 14.
As Corey would reveal later in his life, the abuse began on the set of The Lost Boys.
He said that an older man that was friends with Corey Feldman took advantage of him sexually.
And this went on, I believe, for 2 years. Lots of secrets and nobody getting the help they needed.
Whenever anyone is molested, especially at a crucial age like that, that is a demon that's going to keep pulling him back.
Kids need protection. And the thing is, when they don't get it, they have a tendency of losing control later on in their life.
He could never get over that abuse, so he wanted to torture himself.
I think this was definitely a lightning rod to getting into the addiction, you know, deeper and deeper until the point of no return.
No longer willing to watch addiction destroy her 18-year-old son, in 1989, his mother decided it was time for Corey to enter rehab.
He was there for a little while, and after this rehab, what happened is that he found the doctors to prescribe him about 100 Valiums in order to be okay from the cocaine. So he got hooked on pills.
I saw what was going on, but until you want to fix yourself and heal yourself, no matter what anybody says, it goes in one ear and it goes out the other.
Haim's drug abuse only got worse, and by the early 90s, it was affecting his career.
He became known as someone that was unreliable. So, you know, he had a couple straight-to-DVD B movies that he did. When directors and producers, nobody wanted to touch him.
Even his closest friend, Corey Feldman, wasn't spared from Haim's increasingly destructive behavior.
The last film we tried to do together was a film that I directed called Busted. By that film, he was already to the point where he could not make it through a workday. So I had to fire him, which was one of the hardest decisions I ever had to make in my career.
You can't really step out when it's happening and go, I'm acting like a being famous acting and I don't care about anybody or anything else but me.
I remember him telling me that he owed one movie $350,000 because he walked out on it.
He dusted out on the business. Really didn't dust out on him. He dusted out on the business. When you start using drugs, you dust out on everything. Not only business, but your people, everyone around you, and friends.
Just 25 years old, Corey Haim had fallen from bankable star to persona non grata in Hollywood. But he was far from hitting rock bottom. By the late 90s, Corey Haim had gone from being one of America's most famous teen idols to an unemployable actor with a serious drug habit.
As Corey's drug problem grew, his career disappeared.
You become a liability if you're, under the influence, and people can't rely on you. You can't get insured.
Hollywood can be very forgiving, I think once or twice, but you just slap Hollywood in the face that many times, I think people are like, no, I can't deal with it.
Things got so bad for Corey that he was even selling his locks of hair on eBay. This is a very desperate move for a young man that needs money, needs help, and needs to start over.
In 2004, after years chasing his dream in Hollywood, Haim's mother convinced him to return to his hometown of Toronto to try and kick his drug habit for good.
Corey was definitely ashamed of the place that he'd gotten to.
He gained all that weight, and he was very miserable and very upset. You're used to going out on the street, you're used to the paparazzis being there, you get used to people coming and wanting autographs. It's just a way of life.
It was a way of life Corey was reluctant to give up. In 2007, A&E lured him out of seclusion. The network offered Haim a chance to reclaim the spotlight in his own reality TV show called The Two Coreys.
The premise of the show was that he was going to be moving in with Corey Feldman and that the two of them would document their lives and their comeback, into the film business.
We thought, wow, this is, my chance to really show my fans and everyone in general who he really was. And it completely backfired on him.
The reality show exposed Haim's darkest secrets and insecurities, including his molestation at age 14, and wreaked havoc on his fragile self-esteem.
He'd pretty much ask me and our friends, please don't watch this, because it hurt him so much and he didn't want us to see him in that light.
During season 2, Haim relapsed into drug use on the set.
Corey's relapse was a huge fail for him. He wanted the show to tell people that he was sober. He wanted it to boost his career. It did none of that.
Desperate to repair his reputation and recover his career, on February 7, 2008, Haim placed an ad in Variety that read, "This is not a stunt. I'm back. I'm ready to work. I'm ready to make amends."
Corey wanted to get back to being a regular working actor.
Putting the ad in Variety was a heartfelt but unfortunately fraudulent effort that everyone turned their back on it.
In the middle of season 2, Corey Feldman had had enough. He refused to speak to Haim again until he got clean. But Haim hadn't just alienated his best friend. When The Two Coreys was canceled in July, he lost his opportunity to redeem himself.
That destroyed him. He couldn't jump on the internet without seeing people bagging him and, putting him down.
But in July of 2009, Corey received the news that would finally motivate him to change his ways.
His mum fell down with breast cancer and that really impacted him.
It was a real wake-up call for him that I need to get myself together because all these years that my mother's been taking care of me, and it was now his turn to be an adult.
Haim found a new doctor to help wean himself from his addiction to pills.
He was on a very intensive, strict program where he was whittling down the medications that he was on to the point where he was on almost nothing.
Corey Haim was finally kicking the drug problem that had accompanied his rise to fame 24 years earlier. And as his health improved, so did his prospects.
He had a lot of great things lined up. American Sunset, in which he was a lead role. He was set to audition for the Green Hornet, and he was due to direct his first feature film in 2010.
It was the weekend of the Oscars, and we're having this chat about, this is the last time we're going to be watching the Oscars together from home, because the next time you're going to be there, you're going to be just like Robert Downey Jr. and making a huge comeback. He was like, yeah, man, you're absolutely right.
In early March 2010, Corey developed flu-like symptoms as Brittany Murphy had just 3 months earlier. But his physician wasn't concerned. A few days later, on the night of March 10th, Haim woke his mother and told her he wasn't feeling well.
We really didn't think anything of it. I mean, he had a fever. It wasn't something that should be taken, too seriously.
When he attempted to stand up later that night, he collapsed. Judy phoned 911. Paramedics rushed Haim to Burbank's Providence St. Joseph Medical Center, where 38-year-old Corey Haim was pronounced dead.
When the end happened, it was like, what? Between Brittany Murphy and Corey, the killing machine of 2010 was walking pneumonia.
It was just the saddest thing in the world because no one would have expected it. It was such a shock.
The autopsy showed a severe case of pneumonia and an enlarged heart. And though only trace drugs were found in his system, many in the media assumed otherwise.
It was extremely abusive and neglectful on the part of the media to do what they did, but at the same time, we live in the age of tabloid journalism and they have to say what they have to say.
The way the media came down on Corey's death was not only unfair but untrue. It was not a drug overdose that he died from, it was pulmonary congestion and pneumonia. And he died of an enlarged heart, which I thought was really ironic because he had a huge heart.
You can look at the autopsy to see that he died of natural causes, but in my opinion, it was Hollywood that killed my friend.
Obviously, Corey Haim was a celebrity. He was also a victim of fame, and unfortunately, he never had the chance to show what he was actually capable of.
While friends and admirers memorialized the actor who'd given many years to Hollywood, the community that fostered his fame was not so generous.
When the Academy Awards didn't include him in the section when they celebrate, commiserate the people that had died that year, it was a huge snub.
They sort of threw him aside and didn't give him the due that he deserved. We know that as fans and as friends. He was a good man. He was a good-hearted man. He was a gifted actor. He's missed.
Heath Ledger was an actor who took his craft very seriously, who believed in full immersion in the role he was playing. And that can be deeply fulfilling, but it can also be very dangerous.
If you look at how many different characters he portrayed and how varied they are.
Let's put a smile on that face.
No two ever are the same.
Why don't you just let me be, huh?
He embedded them into his being.
Not taking my kids!
He wanted to be an illusionist. He wanted to disappear into the role. He was successful.
Look, man, these kids are at a tender age. They tense easily, okay?
He had an integrity that I've rarely seen in actors.
So you saved my life. Now let me do something in return for you.
He passionately cared about films and the idea of movie making.
I've waited my whole life for this moment.
And he was just incredibly good at it.
Heath Ledger was born on April 4th, 1979, in Perth, an isolated town in Western Australia. He performed in school plays as a child, and by the age of 14, he was landing roles on local television shows. From an early age, Ledger took his work very seriously. When he was chosen for the Australian TV series Sweat at age 16, Heath refused to take the easy way out.
He had a choice between playing the gay cyclist and another character, and he chose the gay character.
Heath went for the role that was less showy, more interior, quieter performance, but offered him more challenges.
But when he saw himself on screen, Heath was a harsh critic of his own performance.
He said of his own early work, especially on television, "I was crap." That was the quote. He was quite brutal in assessing his own performance. He could see all the faults. That, I think, made him more determined to pursue acting because he knew he could improve.
Heath got the lead role in a show called Roar, which shot in Australia and was aired in America. And on the set, he met Lisa Zane. She decided to move to LA, and so did he.
Following his new girlfriend to Hollywood proved to be a smart move. Within a year, Heath caught his first big break in the high school comedy, 10 Things I Hate About You.
Ready for the prom?
Yes, ma'am.
The critics noticed this bright new face that seemed to have a lot going for him and a lot of potential.
Having starred in a successful teen movie, similar offers rolled in for Heath.
Hollywood is known for having a formula that works, and when you have a really pretty boy with blonde hair and big great eyes and a strapping fellow, they want to put you into that box. He didn't want to play that part, and he was fighting Hollywood to make sure they didn't typecast him.
For a year or so, he didn't take any roles, even though they were offered.
His friends thought he was crazy. His parents back in Australia wondered what he was doing.
Heath was even willing to call it quits rather than accept a role that didn't meet his high standards.
He did get to the stage where he was on the verge of heading back to Australia. And at that moment, he found himself up for a part in a film called The Patriot, acting opposite Mel Gibson.
To be the young, supporting male lead in a movie where Mel Gibson plays your father, another Australian, was almost like passing the baton.
The Patriot was the dramatic role that Heath had been holding out for. But with his next film, A Knight's Tale, Ledger's performance was overshadowed by a marketing campaign that turned the serious actor into a pin-up.
He was called into Colombia for a meeting about the promotional campaign.
The posters had a big picture of his face with "He will rock you." It was very much geared towards, "Hey ladies, check out the new heartthrob on the block."
It was Heath's worst nightmare coming true. He didn't want to be the pretty boy.
He felt that they were packaging him like a product. And in the middle of the meeting, he rushed out of the room and went into the bathroom and locked himself in a stall and said something like, I'm not ready for this, I don't want this kind of career.
It's an investment. It's like, why are you attracted to a bottle of Coke? It's because someone has invested a lot of money into promoting that, and all of a sudden you think it's good.
They were trying to put him in a certain mold as a big star, and he just refused it.
Once again, Heath stuck to his guns and waited for the roles he wanted to do.
In 2002, he was in the running to play Spider-Man.
There was even rumors that he was going to be the next James Bond.
Most people would sell their grandmothers to play those parts, but he didn't really care about being a movie star. For him, it was all about getting into the role and what he got out of it.
He was fighting the Hollywood machine. He made a concerted effort to find offbeat, interesting films.
It was his standout performance in one of those films, Monsters Ball, that helped Ledger land one of the most challenging roles of his career, a repressed gay cowboy in Brokeback Mountain.
This was a great script. It was a film that was going to be challenging, that he recognized told a story that wasn't told every day in Hollywood. He saw an opportunity, and he really threw himself into that role.
What the f*** are you looking at? Huh?
On camera, Heath played a man torn apart by his desires, and behind the scenes, Heath was equally driven to deliver the perfect performance.
The part got into his head and was with him all the time. And being such a perfectionist, he would worry about, at the end of a day's shooting, had he done enough? And that was an exhausting process for him, both mentally and physically.
And he started to have increasing difficulty sleeping. It did create, I think, a high level of stress. It wasn't like he walked off the set and he could just shrug it off.
Privately, Heath suffered, while the public lauded his deeply affecting performance. Brokeback Mountain earned Ledger his first Academy Award nomination. But for the serious young actor, an Oscar nod was nothing to celebrate.
Once you're nominated for an Oscar, you have to go out there and campaign for it. It's like going for a political office. You have to shake hands, you have to attend luncheons, you have to schmooze.
He hated that. He felt he was whoring himself out.
It must have been demoralizing to Heath, who kind of put himself in that compromising position and then didn't go home with the award anyway.
Heath may have delivered his most celebrated performance to date, but it left him exhausted and depressed. But that wouldn't stop him from taking on a new role, one that would drive him perilously close to the edge. By 2006, Heath Ledger had developed a reputation as an intense young actor who gave everything to his performances. His drive had made him a bona fide movie star with roles in The Patriot and Brokeback Mountain. But it was also tearing the 26-year-old apart.
It was the start of him getting perhaps too intense about his art and layering too much stress upon himself than even an artist should be able to handle.
Still, Ledger's life wasn't all drama.
His co-star playing his wife in Brokeback Mountain was Michelle Williams. Cast and crew on that movie could see that there was a romance blossoming rather quickly.
Within a year, Michelle was visibly pregnant. On October 28, 2005, their daughter, Matilda, was born.
Oh man, he was over the moon. It was like somebody gave him the best Christmas present you could ever get. He loved Matilda.
They bought an apartment in Brooklyn. He was distancing himself from the movie business. He took 18 months off from filmmaking in order to be, I think he described it as Mr. Mom.
He just loved being at home with Matilda. That was giving him the greatest joy. It was a good place in his life.
I think he was, for a while, happier being the family, the three of them, than worrying too much about acting in Hollywood.
For the first time in a long time, he was able to relax.
Outside the pressures of Hollywood and his acting career, Heath finally found a balance in his life. But in 2006, when he accepted a role in the Bob Dylan biopic, I'm Not There, that balance started to slip away.
He started to be overwhelmed with the same anxieties again. Had he forgotten how to act? Had he lost his ability because he hadn't done it for so long? Was he rusty?
I'm Not There was a critical success, but increasingly, Michelle and Heath were having a hard time managing family life and work. And by September 2007, the relationship was in trouble.
I think it's really hard when you have two people that are in the same business and they're both trying to work.
Some of Heath's friends said that the differences between the two of them first manifested themselves during the Oscar campaign, that Michelle was thrilled to be nominated for supporting actress for Brokeback Mountain, and she really got into the campaign, and Heath wasn't. Heath was exactly the opposite. For him, it was like phony.
Eventually, they decided that they were better off separating.
It took away the stability that he'd been so glad to find. He kind of felt like he was on his own again in the chaos of the world.
Reeling from the breakup, Heath immersed himself in his next role in the Batman film The Dark Knight.
You see, in their last moments, people show you who they really are.
Heath really became obsessed with getting this role just right. He locked himself away in his hotel, wrote a diary as if he was the Joker, practiced voices into a tape recorder, tried to get the laugh and the evil cackle.
He was essentially embedding the part of a psychopath within himself.
It was a totally overwhelming role, and it was so weird and twisted that it stands to reason that it took a lot out of him.
The whole Batman experience was really like put him on his ass.
He was lucky if he had 2 hours sleep a night, and he'd take sleeping tablets to try and get himself to sleep. He found they weren't working, so he'd take more.
Heath began to depend on prescription drugs to sleep and to function, and things really just got worse.
Abuse of prescription drugs is a danger for everyone, but especially for celebrities. A lot of doctors are apparently dazzled by the star quotient in their room, so doctors kind of bend the rules and just give them way too many prescriptions.
In late 2007, just weeks after wrapping The Dark Knight, he threw himself into yet another psychologically challenging role, the con artist Tony in Terry Gilliam's The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus.
His health was not at its best. He was involved in long night shoots in London.
It was raining, it was cold, and he got sick. The doctor said that this is the beginning of pneumonia. Take a few days off, take a rest, and he just refused. He couldn't sleep, so he might as well be on the set.
In January 2008, on a break from filming Imaginarium, Heath returned to his New York home.
It was supposed to be a vacation, but it turned out not to be much of a vacation because he couldn't sleep more than ever.
On January 22, 2008, his housekeeper and his masseuse were unable to wake Heath up for an afternoon appointment.
He wasn't responding, so they called the ambulance and Heath was pronounced dead.
The official cause of death was a lethal combination of prescription drugs.
At the time of his death, Heath had an anti-anxiety medication, he had sleeping medications, and then he also had painkillers in his system.
You put that combination together and that's lethal.
Heath Ledger was dead at the age of 28. And for the actor who'd shunned fame his entire career, his death became the kind of celebrity spectacle Ledger would surely have loathed.
Almost immediately, as of the 911 call, there was just a circus of media attention.
I think people were obviously quite stunned and shocked and saddened.
And some suggest it was the intensity of Heath's performances that drove him to excessive drug use.
Nothing wrong with wanting to do things right and perfectly, but when it interferes with your life, getting 8 hours of sleep, it's going to be so easy for you to take something that's going to take you out.
What's so ironic is that Heath didn't really want to be the typical movie star, and yet he ended up having almost an iconic Hollywood death.
After Heath's passing, The Dark Knight would become one of the most successful films ever released. For his role as the Joker, Heath became only the second actor in history after the much-revered Peter Finch to win a posthumous Oscar.
There aren't that many actors of the caliber of Heath Ledger. I think he was the best of his generation.
For the Hollywood community, there was a feeling of potential that was never going to be realized. He was a performer who was going to go on and do bigger and better things.
The word tragedy is thrown about way too much, but it was a tragedy. It just shouldn't have happened.
People felt a devastating emotional situation for a lot of different people on a lot of levels. It's just really a horrible experience.
He is the actor that we will remember where we were when he died.